I wrote about unpleasant behavior of my grandparents in the Telegram channel, and they found out about it. They don't talk to me anymore. My story will be long, and most of the events happened long before the key point. This may all sound like a solid wall of excuses, but I still feel guilty for my actions and realize that I did a pretty mean thing. But I want you to know the context before you condemn me. I am 18 years old. I was born and raised in a full family. My parents are scientists, and they've always had a lot of work to do. When I was 11, I went to a very good school, but I had to drive back and forth for an hour and a half. Mom was worried because there were a lot of missing children announcements in the city at that time, but she couldn't pick me up, and due to my childish forgetfulness and selfishness, I often forgot to turn on the sound on my phone and didn't answer. Because of this, she decided to send me to live with her parents while she has so much work to do, and until I grow up. It is important to note that before that, I spent almost the entire summer, and the previous one too, with them, and we constantly quarreled. As a child, they pampered and loved me, and I loved coming to them, but with the onset of 9 to 10 years, everything changed, wanting to teach me to work, which was, in fact, right. They gave me a list of tasks every day that I had to do. Every day it included from 7 to 12, it took from 6 hours or more. After that, I was allowed to go out with friends, but often I didn't want to finish everything. I didn't have time before the time when I wanted to go to friends, and it got very late, which is why we spent only 1 to 2 hours together, or it seemed to me that there was a lot of it, and because of the scandals, I could be physically punished and banned from walking, as well as my favorite books and toys were taken away. In addition to working at the cottage, my duties included daily lessons, and despite my love for the exact sciences, I hated that because of my grandmother's diligence. After such a vacation, I begged my mother not to send me to my grandmother anymore. Don't think that my mom spoiled me too much. No, for some reason I was quite willing to help with the housework with her, because it wasn't a to-do list posted on the door, but requests that really made sense to me. An 11-year-old. I have repeatedly said that I don't want to live with them or even date them because I was really offended. As adolescence approached, I became stubborn, abrupt, and uncooperative. My academic performance declined slightly, and my mother's parents convinced her that I had gotten involved with a bad company it wasn't, and that I urgently needed to study, and offered to take me home. I was not warned about this, and on December 23rd, when I returned from school, I saw my mother's suitcase in the apartment, and I found out that for a while, not forever, I'm moving in with my grandparents. I was told that I had been warned. It couldn't have been, because I would have flatly refused. I was in shock, crying, hysterical, got down on my knees and begged to leave me at home, promised to fix my grades, always call my mom, and never fight with her again, but nothing helped. They took me downstairs and took me to their apartment with my things, and then they took them further. My grandparents explained to me that I had behaved abominably, and my parents had given me to them so that they could reform me and separate me from the bad company. I repeat, I did not have it. They said that until I become a normal, well-mannered, and good girl, I will not go back to my parents. On New Year's Eve, our family had a tradition of gathering on January 1 with the whole family at the table with grandparents. Mom and Dad arrived, but I couldn't even look at them. I started crying. I didn't go to sit with them and couldn't even have a proper conversation because I started crying as soon as I saw them. On New Year's Eve, I was given an ebook with an ink screen and books loaded into it. Her parents thought it was a nice and cool gift because she didn't have access to the internet, and her grandparents didn't worry. But they didn't guess. Just 3 days later, my cheap touchscreen phone was taken away from me. It was broken due to my carelessness, but it worked fine. They forbade me to use it forever and gave me a push-button Nokia instead, specifying that there would not even be a snake. That was LOL. And I didn't see the ebook for another 2.5 months because it was also considered a gadget. To say that life there was not pleasant is to say nothing. I was kicked out of the house. They even took my Walkman, colored pens, books, and everything that could distract me from my studies. When I got home, I received a to-do list again, and I had to retell each homework assignment and show it to my grandmother, who checked it. They watched me come and go from school, forbade me to dress the way I wanted. They watched what I was drawing and shouted if I drew gloomy and dark pictures. They came to my school for a parent-teacher meeting and personally talked to all the teachers so that they treated me more harshly and did not give me any favors, but reported all my violations to them. By the way, They didn't understand this at school, and from now on they only talked to my mother. When I qualified for the Olympics in another city in March, they forced my mother to come with me because they said I couldn't be left alone. After this trip, she managed to convince me to give the ebook back. At some point, I got carried away with The Lord of the Rings. It became an outlet in a series of endless scandals, quibbles, and accusations that I was a spoiled little trash who needed to be reformed. I watched movies many times when I was allowed to sit at the computer, reread books more than 20 times, but they also took that away from me. We fought almost every day. We exchanged insults almost every day. When people yelled at me that I was an ungrateful trash, that they were sick because of me, and that my parents had spoiled me, I shouted back that I hated them and that they were getting to me. Grandpa almost every day grabbed a slipper, a stick, or a belt. They told me every day that I was nobody, that I was a terrible, lazy person, that I don't have any friends and no one will ever communicate with me because I act like a clown with my peers, that I'm constantly lying and they don't believe in anything anymore, so they'll be watching me. Due to the fact that they tracked my time out of school and checked my diary, I couldn't go out with friends and was forbidden to stay late because they thought I was in bad company and stealing, smoking, doing something else. All this time, except for the trip, I was forbidden to see my parents and sometimes to call them. Also, my mother was forbidden to call me and communicate with me, explaining that all this was harmful to my re-education. Against this background, I began to consume stress with sweets and gained a couple of kilograms. They mocked me and said that I had apparently decided to get better and become a balloon. And since childhood, I've had terrible complexes about my figure. I left them in November next year. For almost a year, I treated them extremely negatively, constantly afraid that they would take me there again. And I guessed right. In the fall of 2020, when I was in 8th grade, there was a second quarantine boom, and all the children were transferred to distance learning. I was left with them again, but this time at the cottage. The fall of 2020 began for me with a depressive episode. I could hardly take care of myself. I couldn't study properly. I couldn't assimilate information. I was constantly thinking that there was no point in my life, and I didn't want to live at all. Before that, I went to a summer camp, and already there in the evenings I had bouts of absolute despair. I lay there for half an hour and realized that I was terribly sick and in pain, but I couldn't figure out why. Things got worse in the fall. I started deliberately picking at the sores until they bled, wore the same oversized black sweater that hung on me like a sack every day, and listened to the same music many times. All this was hidden from my parents, and they did not understand what had happened to me. After I was sent to the country, my grandparents were shocked at how I let myself go, and doubled their educational measures. First of all, everything that I could just eat without cooking was removed from the refrigerator. From now on, I had to learn to cook by myself. A belt or a whip appeared in my field of vision almost every day, as soon as I refused to do something and started crying. I didn't take care of myself anyway, ate whatever I could, didn't wash my hair, and didn't want anything at all. I still couldn't bring myself to study. Everything I listened to flew out of my head, and I didn't even try to do my homework. The only ray of light was my friend, to whom I was telling all this. She was going through a difficult period too, and I do not know what I would have done without her. The end of the trimester was approaching, and I had 6 unsatisfactory grades. The question was raised about my expulsion, but the teachers and the head teacher noticed that I was not behaving as usual, and there was clearly something wrong with me. I was given a trimester to fix it. And then my grandfather burst out. I still remember that day, because it seems to have been one of the most painful days of my life. They told me everything. That I'm a terrible hypocrite, and everyone wants me to leave school because it's disgusting to talk to me. I was told that it was high time to send me to a boarding school for troubled teenagers or to a school for juvenile delinquents because that's all I care about. That I'd get kicked out of my good school and go to the track. That I'm a disgrace to the family and a complete fool, an egotist, and no one but my parents will need me. That I have a swollen, ugly, lazy face, that I sit on my ass and do nothing but eat sweets. At that time, I weighed about 53 kilograms with a height of 163. They said a lot more terrible and vile things, but it didn't matter anymore. The quarantine ended. I was able to close my debts in a couple of subjects, and I was still left at school with a promise to catch up with the program. From that moment on, I studied all day, studied, and studied again. I was able to catch up, and in the end, the problems remained only in a couple of subjects. At school, I was respected for my hard work and determination, and everything was getting better, except for my mental health. I think I said that I had complexes about my figure. When I arrived in my city, I started looking for diets and ways to lose weight for the first time. Of course, at first it was ridiculous and pathetic. I started and broke down on the same day, and I was doing nothing at all. If we omit the entire period until the end of June, then I composed my own songs, tightened up my studies, successfully passed the transfer exams, and received my first good touch-screen phone as a gift. Since the summer, I have been in the active phase of RPP, and at the same time, terrible perfectionism in studies. I sat at my lessons for 8 to 10 hours a day. After school I did only lessons and tried to do everything perfectly. From August to February, I lost 56 to 31 kilograms and ended up in a psychiatric hospital. Before that, I was an excellent student in algebra and geometry, and I improved my physics, which was always difficult for me. I went to the hospital on my own because I couldn't stop. I ate 250 calories a day for 3 months and walked from 10 to 40,000 steps. My parents tried to control it, but I lied anyway. I was terrified of gaining weight from an extra spoonful and still didn't consider myself thin. At the end of this journey, I was already losing consciousness while walking and realized that the end was coming soon. And she agreed to be hospitalized. This is a separate story, and I don't want to make my story any darker. I can only say that they aggravated my mental state and did more harm than good by keeping me there for 3 months. A psychiatrist advised my mother to set up an equivalent psychiatric hospital at home, and seeing that I was still determined to lose weight, she agreed. Now all the control was over the food. I couldn't choose what to eat or how much to eat. After eating, I was forbidden to stay alone for 4 hours, and I was allowed to go to the toilet only under supervision. My grandparents decided that my illness was a pretense and self-indulgence, that I was trying to appear like a sick victim in order to be pitied, and that it wouldn't cost me anything to gain weight again. I had nothing to lose. They left me for the 2nd year of school, and again they met me halfway, seeing how eager I was to learn, and I do not know how to thank them. Back then, I was only interested in weight. I tried all the methods: hiding food, vomiting, cheating, throwing food away. In a month, under the supervision of All for Adults, I managed to lose 35 to 30 kilograms and get into intensive care. There, I refused to eat anything for another month, pulled the probe out of my nose, poured the mixture into the sink, caused vomiting, refused any food except sweet tea, and managed to lose up to 28 kilograms. After which I went back to the same psychiatric hospital for 3 months. Then I got out in September and went to school closer to December. I was accepted, understood, and everything got better. My eating disorder is still with me, but I've learned to live with it and not cause a lot of pain to my loved ones, and I'm not afraid of eating and gaining weight. Numerous health problems greatly slow down the recovery process, but I hope that I can overcome my demons, cope with bouts of bulimia, weight loss, and compensatory behavior. The right antipsychotics for me were not selected at the hospital. During the treatment, my short-term memory completely disappeared. I constantly fell asleep on the move, and this affected my cognitive functions. The district psychiatrist allowed them to be cancelled in January, and the world seemed to come alive. When my grandparents returned, they suddenly realized that anorexia was a disease and decided that I was still very ill and needed to stay in the hospital longer. But gradually our relationship improved. After my illness, I became a completely different person, quiet, non-confrontational, introverted, and reasonable. I don't know what influenced me more, growing up. After all, I was almost 16 or the experience I had, but I learned to reason, avoid conflicts, and stop thinking only about myself. Our relationship improved. They helped me with money. I came to them and always openly talked about my affairs, sincerely interested in their affairs and health. After my first hospitalization, I started a diary on a social network where I talked about what was happening to me, how I was in a psychiatric hospital, kept a diary every day, and wrote about what was bothering me. I also posted my songs, playlists, and shared everything that was in that miserable existence under supervision. After returning from the second resort in the psychiatric hospital, I conducted it continuously, and in May 2023 I transferred it to Telegram, where I continued to conduct it. I didn't do it for popularity or anything else. I felt that I needed it, that I wanted to write it all and share it with others, that I needed feedback. Among other things, I wrote about relationships with relatives, about my childhood insults and traumas. I didn't care that I couldn't take the trash out of the hut, and it was probably my mistake. I described in detail the period of my life with my grandparents, recalled individual situations and other details. Once less, once more. I talked about it the way I remembered and understood myself, and I never called them names or insulted them in my posts, but just talked about my feelings and made rather naive and sometimes cruel and cynical conclusions in the process of introspection. In August, I got poisoned and went back to the hospital. My grandparents decided that I was deceiving everyone and losing weight on purpose, which is why I ended up in the hospital. They put pressure on my mother to sign the documents for my transfer to a psychiatric hospital, although the doctor did not even give her such a document and did not offer this option, since my condition was purely somatic. When they asked me to come to them after school to see them because they miss me, they called my mom every time and asked her to look after me, not let me go to school, put me in the hospital, or forbid me to use the phone. I was already 16 years old, and my mother and I had been in a normal relationship for a year. It all pissed me off, and I had no one to discuss it with, because I was too shy to pour out my soul. Because of this, all this also ended up in my then closed Telegram channel, which had a maximum of 40 people. As I grew up, there were fewer and fewer such posts. I understood what was appropriate and what was not. I made a lot of friends who were interested in my channel, and for convenience, I left a link to it in my profile by opening the channel. I thought I had nothing to hide anymore. This diary clearly shows the stages of my growing up, and I am no longer so ashamed of my past posts because I understand why and why I wrote them. The number of subscribers grew, of course, but so did the number of my acquaintances. It's very rare for anything related to my family to appear there now, because I realize how inappropriate it is. Important note, my grandfather is a very eccentric man with conservative views and a short temper. He is used to blaming everyone around him and is absolutely sure that he always knows what is best to do. This trait has worsened with age due to chronic illnesses and quitting smoking. Grandma has been getting along with him for almost 50 years, but it's not as easy as it seems. She's resigned and just loves him no matter what, but his short temper really affects the whole family, and living with him is very difficult. Let's get back to the situation. It was a very hot summer in the middle of July, and I spent some time in the country, although I really disliked this place. In the early morning, I was woken up by a call from my grandfather, who literally demanded that I immediately pack up and go to the country. Annoyed, I said that it was actually at the cottage, and that I would not want to go there in such weather if I were not there, and in general I answered quite sharply, but quickly cooled down, and said that it was okay. My stupid head decided that it would be funny to write a post in a Telegram in a joke about how I was startled awake. Earlier, I said that I opened a Telegram link for all users, and my stupid head completely forgot that my grandparents still want to know everything about me. They came to my channel and read this message. I admit, it was very stupid and mean of me to write this in my Telegram channel, because, in fact, it was complete nonsense, and I could well have remained silent. I put my grandfather in an unsightly light, not thinking about the fact that he was worried about my health. And I'm ashamed of it. They don't talk to me anymore, and my conscience torments me, but I can't bring myself to apologize personally because I'm afraid they won't accept my apologies. My grandmother wrote to me that she was disappointed and that I was driving a sick, unhappy man with my poison and meanness, that I didn't understand how he cared about me, and that I was shaming my family for the sake of a dirty hype. I immediately apologized and deleted the post, but it didn't help.